So now we potentially have an answer, maybe. We go on to how do we interpret this data? Because now we've got the calculations hopefully down. Well, they're just numbers now as a result of having the data there. So this comes from Tim Excel from the University of Portsmouth, who was talking about how we interpret asymmetry and whether or not it should be interpreted in relation to test variability. And his suggestion, and this has been championed quite heavily by Matt Jordan in his work as well, which is that an asymmetry might only be real if it's greater than the coefficient of variation, the test variability value, okay? So what we do is we'll plot our imaginary asymmetry scores in peak force from a counter movement jump on this graph. So we've got individual data for 16 hypothetical people, all right? And if we map our coefficient of variation, all right, onto our graph, imagine we had a coefficient of variation of 4% for the counter movement jump test. This allows you to look and go, actually, athletes 4, 6, 9, and 14, they got, yes, a very, very low asymmetry, and it's also kind of within the noise or the error of the test. But actually, all the other athletes are showing a very, very real asymmetry in this instance. This doesn't mean you need to go and correct it necessarily. And let's also appreciate that this is hypothetical data for a single time point. Okay? So next time you go and test them, maybe athlete 11, who's debatably got a sizable asymmetry over 14%, doesn't necessarily mean it will be 14% next time you test them next week or in 3 days' time. Equally, the test variability value might change as well. Okay? Now, hopefully, if the test is reliable, it won't change too much, but these are all things that need to be taken into consideration. Okay? The other thing to remember is that how those formulas were set up on the previous slide, they'll always give you positive values, okay? Now, we kind of proposed a scenario where that second equation, it tried to give you the direction of asymmetry, yeah? It tried to give you a negative sign, but it changed the magnitude. So actually, what we're suggesting is if you just apply something called an if function, okay, in Microsoft Excel onto the end of the formula, this can give you the direction. And it's basically just a way of going, here's the way to calculate asymmetry. If the dominant leg or the left leg, however you define it, is less than the right, turn it into a negative and don't change the magnitude, is effectively what it is, okay? So now we've got the direction of asymmetry, and anything that's above the 0 line indicates you've got a larger score on the dominant sides, and anything that's below the 0 line indicative of having a larger score on the non-dominant leg. And then the process is the same. It allows us to map our coefficient of variation or our test variability score, okay, onto the graph. And this can tell you who's got a real asymmetry and which leg they're favoring. Now, you can, of course, just go into Excel and look at the numbers, right? But appreciate that if this is data from a single leg test, then you now have to look at the asymmetry column and compare it to 2 coefficient of variation scores, because you get one for left, you get one for right. And then you've got to look at which leg gets the larger value out of left and right, or dominant, non-dominant. So this might be just a nice way to graphically represent the information quicker for you, and or potentially report it for coaches or your performance director or your superiors, should they ever want to know about it.